Settle down, settle down. Yes, even you in the back with the auxiliary breathing apparatus. I can see all four of your eyes wandering. Ambassador Greg Toll adjusted his formal diplomatic sash, the 27 merit badges clinking softly against one another as he moved to the center of the amphitheater. The blue-tinted lighting reflected off his scaled skin, casting an imposing shadow across the eager faces of the diplomatic cadets before him. I am Ambassador Greg Toll, Senior Crisis Negotiator for the Orion Confederacy, and this is Advanced Xenodiplomatic Relations, Session 12B. For those checking your schedules and wondering if you've wandered into the wrong lecture hall, no, you haven't. The topic listed as handling volatile species is precisely what we'll be discussing today. He tapped a sequence on his wrist device, and the massive holographic display behind him flickered to life, displaying a simple image that caused an immediate hush to fall over the previously chattering audience. A blue and green planet, swirled with white clouds. Earth, Greg Toll announced, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. Home world of the species known as humans. A nervous titter ran through the audience. One brave soul, a Talaxian with particularly vibrant head crests, raised a tentacle. Yes, Cadet Prilvor? Ambassador, with all due respect, the humans have only been part of the Galactic Concord for 50 standard cycles. Surely there are more volatile species to focus on? The Draconi hive mind? Or perhaps the quantum gorgons? Greg Toll's secondary breathing slits flared slightly, a sign of amusement that only the most attentive cadets caught. An excellent question. Tell me, cadet, have you ever heard of the Zagaran Collective? The Talaxian's head crest flattened in confusion. No, Ambassador. Precisely, Greg Toll replied, nodding slowly. And there's a very good reason for that, which I'm about to explain. The ambassador moved closer to the edge of the stage, his voice lowering to a near whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. I've personally negotiated with warlords of 17 different species. I've brokered peace between the Twin Suns Armada and the Void Consortium. I was the lead mediator during the notorious Proxima Centauri standoff. He paused, letting his credentials sink in. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my 300 cycles of diplomatic service prepared me for negotiating alongside humans. The entire lecture hall fell into complete silence. Today's lesson isn't about volatile species, cadets. It's about what happens when you push a peaceful species too far. It's about understanding the single most important phrase in human diplomatic lexicon: we don't negotiate with terrorists. Greg Toll's four-fingered hand swept dramatically across the holographic display, changing the image to a shattered space station drifting against the backdrop of a nebula. And it begins with the most expensive diplomatic mistake the galaxy has ever witnessed. 52 galactic standard cycles ago. Greg Toll continued, his clawed fingers manipulating the holographic controls to show a timeline. Humanity had just begun their expansion beyond their solar system. They were, by our standards, absolute newcomers to the interstellar community. The ambassador's tertiary eyelid flicked momentarily in what the more perceptive cadets recognized as a sign of remembered anxiety. The Zagarans, meanwhile, had built themselves quite the reputation. The hologram shifted to display a species with elongated limbs, mottled gray skin, and unsettlingly large, pupil-less eyes. Never heard of them, have you? Good. That's very, very good. Greg Toll paced across the platform, his ceremonial diplomatic medals jingling softly. The Zagaran Collective had perfected what we might call an economic model. They specialized in capturing vessels, space stations, and occasionally small colonies, then ransoming them back to their respective governments or corporate entities. A nasty business. But one they had turned into a science. 27 different species had paid these ransoms over the centuries. It was considered simply the cost of doing business in certain sectors. He tapped his control pad again, and the hologram displayed a sleek, white research vessel. The Galileo, a human scientific vessel studying gravitational anomalies in the Cygnus sector. Crew of 42. Minimal defensive capabilities. The perfect target, or so the Zagarans thought. Graktal allowed himself a small, tight smile that revealed just the edges of his serrated teeth. When news of the capture reached the human authorities, the response confounded everyone. No fleet mobilization. No panic transmissions. Instead, they sent a single diplomatic shuttle. One shuttle. He emphasized each word with a tap of his claw against the podium. The Galactic Council expected the standard response negotiation, payment, everyone moves on with valuable lessons learned. A Meridian cadet with bioluminescent patches pulsing in curiosity raised an appendage. Why would the Council permit such extortion to continue? An insightful question. Graktal nodded appreciatively. The Zagarans operated in the border regions where jurisdiction was complicated. They were careful to target different species each time, never creating enough unified opposition. And frankly, they were extremely good at hiding, or so we believed. The hologram shifted to show a conference room aboard a neutral station, sleek, sterile, and designed for complex negotiations. As the most experienced crisis negotiator available, I was assigned as the neutral mediator. Standard procedure. The Proxima Treaty mandated third-party oversight for all hostage negotiations. I remember arriving early, reviewing the files on human diplomatic protocols. He barked a laugh that startled several cadets. Waste of time. Nothing in those files prepared me for what followed. The image zoomed in on the conference table, focusing on an empty chair. The human delegation was scheduled to arrive within the hour. The Zagaran representatives were already present, smug and confident. After all, they'd done this 27 times before. Their success rate was impressive, -100%. Every species eventually paid. Graktal's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping an octave. But as I would soon learn, humans have a very, very different approach to such situations. The Zagarans had inadvertently broken the most important rule in the galaxy: never, under any circumstances, take humans hostage. His scaled hand hovered dramatically over the control panel, ready to advance the presentation. And that, my eager cadets, is when Admiral Nora Blackwood walked into the room and changed galactic diplomacy forever. The first time I saw Admiral Nora Blackwood, I mistook her for a support staff member, Graktal admitted, adjusting his ceremonial collar. A misconception she did nothing to correct. The hologram shifted to show a human female of average height, dark hair pulled back severely from her face, wearing a simple gray uniform with minimal insignia. No ceremonial armor. No visible weapons, no entourage of advisors. Just this unassuming biped walking calmly into a high-stakes negotiation as if she were ordering a beverage at a spaceport cafe. Graktal's secondary breathing slits flared at the memory. When she finally took her seat at the negotiation table, I noted something profoundly disturbing about her demeanor. She was smiling. Not the aggressive tooth-baring display common in some predator species, but something far more unsettling. She looked amused. The image zoomed in on the human's face, highlighting the slight upward curve of her lips, the relaxed posture, the steady gaze. The Zagaran chief negotiator Vrex began with their standard demands: 20% of Earth's quantum computing technology, mining rights to 3 asteroids in human territory, and 2 billion galactic credits. All quite reasonable by established ransom standards. Graktal paused dramatically. And then Admiral Blackwood spoke her first words. "I appreciate your time today, but I need to make Earth's position clear. We don't negotiate with terrorists." Several cadets exchanged confused glances. Yes, exactly the reaction we all had. Graktal exclaimed, pointing at the bewildered students. This phrase meant nothing to the Zagarans. It meant nothing to me. Vrex actually asked me to check the translation matrix. The ambassador's thick-fingered hand swept through the air, mimicking the confusion. I confirmed the translation was accurate, though the meaning remained obscure. The Admiral clarified in the most bone-chilling manner possible. She said, and I quote, "This isn't a negotiation. This is a courtesy call. You have 24 standard hours to release our people unharmed. After that, we will retrieve them ourselves. The hologram showed the Zagaran negotiators, their elongated faces contorted in what appeared to be laughter. The Zagarans found this hilarious. Imagine a newly spacefaring species threatening the collective that had successfully executed 27 hostage operations without a single failure. Vrex actually asked if humans always bluff so poorly in negotiations. Graktol's voice lowered to a near whisper. The Admiral's response was to check her timepiece, make a simple notation on her datapad, and say the countdown begins now. 24 hours. I suggest you use them wisely. He paused, letting the tension build. And then, breaking every protocol in diplomatic history, she simply stood up and prepared to leave after less than 10 minutes. The hologram showed the confused faces of the Zagarans and Graktol's own younger self, mandibles slack with shock. I reminded her that standard negotiation protocols required at least 3 formal exchanges before any party could exit. Admiral Blackwood looked at me not unkindly, but with absolute certainty, and said something that haunts me to this day. Sometimes the only winning move is not to play their game at all. The Zagarans, of course, dismissed the deadline completely, Graktol continued, his scaled skin catching the blue light as he paced the stage. In the official record, Chief Negotiator Vrex referred to humans as soft-skinned bipeds playing at galactic politics. The unofficial translation was considerably less polite. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the cadets. What the Zagarans failed to recognize, what we all failed to recognize, were the warning signs. Like prey animals missing the subtle shift in wind that carries a predator's scent. The holographic display shifted to show a tactical map of the sector. Small blue dots representing human vessels appeared to be moving in seemingly random patterns. While the negotiations were supposedly ongoing, I received reports of unusual human fleet movements. Nothing alarming a research vessel here, a courier there, but the pattern seemed purposeful. When I inquired, Admiral Blackwood expressed interest in continuing our discussions over a meal. Graktol's tertiary eyelid flicked rapidly, a sign of remembered distress. During that meal, the Admiral asked the most peculiar questions. Not about negotiation tactics or ransom prices, but about Zagaran biology, their respiratory systems, their vision spectrum, their sleep cycles, their planetary defense systems, all couched in what appeared to be polite cultural curiosity. The ambassador tapped his control pad, and the display showed surveillance footage of Admiral Blackwood smiling pleasantly while taking notes. I remember thinking her questions odd but dismissed them as a newcomer's fascination with alien species. What a fool I was. Graktol slapped his chest with a self-deprecating gesture. She wasn't making conversation. She was gathering intelligence. The display changed to show a communication monitoring station, with unusual spikes in transmission activity. 12 hours before the deadline, our monitoring stations began detecting strange encrypted transmissions throughout Zagaran space. Brief pulses, nearly undetectable, using frequencies rarely monitored. When confronted, Admiral Blackwood claimed they were standard check-ins with Earth Command. Her expression never changed. Graktol's voice lowered dramatically. 6 hours before the deadline, I became professionally concerned. The Zagarans remained confident. But I had begun to notice something about the humans that truly disturbed me. They weren't behaving like a species preparing to pay a ransom. They weren't behaving like a species preparing for failed negotiations. They were behaving like a species preparing for something else entirely. The hologram showed Graktol approaching Admiral Blackwood, his posture showing clear agitation. I asked her directly if Earth was planning something foolish. She looked at me with those unsettlingly calm eyes and said, "Ambassador, we're planning something necessary." Then she checked her timepiece and added, "You might want to distance yourself from your Zagaran colleagues in the next few hours. Professional advice." Graktol's breathing slits flared wide with remembered anxiety. That was when I knew with absolute certainty that something unprecedented was about to occur. When the 24-hour mark arrived, Graktal said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried throughout the lecture hall, the Zagarans presented their final offer. The ransom had increased by 15% due to what they called administrative inconveniences. The display showed the Zagaran negotiators, looking smug and confident as they pushed a data tablet across the table. Admiral Blackwood glanced at the tablet, then at her timepiece. Without touching their offer, she stood up and straightened her simple gray uniform. "It appears," she said with that same unnerving calm, "that we've reached the end of our discussion. We tried it your way." Graktal's four-fingered hand sliced through the air in a cutting motion. I remember thinking her statement odd. At no point had humans tried the Zagaran way. They hadn't counter-offered or haggled. They had simply stated terms and a deadline. He shook his head. It was only later I understood she wasn't talking to the Zagarans at all. She was speaking to her command. The hologram shifted to show the negotiation room's light suddenly flickering. Exactly 3 minutes after she left the room, every communication system in the station experienced what technicians later called simultaneous catastrophic failure. The Zagaran delegates received urgent messages from their fleet, then nothing. Complete silence. Graktal manipulated the controls to show a tactical display of Zagaran space. What we pieced together afterward was astounding. A coordinated cyber attack had disabled the entire Zagaran defense network. Their supposedly impenetrable encryption broken. Their autonomous defense systems paralyzed, their communication arrays blind and deaf. A cadet with spiral antennae raised an appendage. "But Ambassador, that would require intimate knowledge of Zagaran systems." "Exactly," Graktal exclaimed, pointing at the perceptive student. "Knowledge that simply wasn't available in any database. Unless someone had been gathering it methodically for the preceding 24 hours through those strange transmission pulses. Infiltration programs disguised as standard communication protocols." The hologram showed small, dark vessels appearing seemingly from nowhere near Zagaran installations. While their systems were compromised, human stealth vessels no detection system had identified moved into position. Vessels that, according to official records, didn't even exist. We later learned they were designated Ghost-class infiltrators, designed specifically for hostage rescue operations. The projection shifted to security footage showing armored human figures moving with practiced precision through corridors. What happened next can only be described as surgical. Human Special Forces teams breached the Zagaran facilities simultaneously across 3 separate locations. Their movements weren't rushed or chaotic, they were methodical, practiced, as if they had rehearsed this exact scenario countless times. Graktal's voice took on a tone of reluctant admiration. In exactly 17 minutes, all 42 hostages were secured, not a single human casualty. The Zagaran guards were disabled with non-lethal methods that specifically targeted their unique biology. Methods that, coincidentally, Admiral Blackwood had inquired about during our cultural discussions. The display showed the Zagaran leadership being escorted in restraints onto human vessels. Most remarkable of all, the humans didn't eliminate the Zagaran leadership. They captured them. Every single member of the collective's command structure was taken alive. When I asked Admiral Blackwood about this surprising mercy, her answer was chilling in its pragmatism. Graktal paused, remembering. "Dead terrorists become martyrs," she told me. "Living terrorists who face justice become examples." And then she added something truly revealing besides. This was never about revenge. This was about setting a precedent. The display showed the Zagaran command ship being towed toward human space. As their vessels departed with both the rescued hostages and the captured Zagaran leadership, Admiral Blackwood sent one final message to the remaining Zagaran forces. It consisted of a single sentence: "The ransom has been paid in full." Graktal closed his secondary eyelids slowly. It was at that moment I realized humans hadn't been unprepared for negotiations. They had never intended to negotiate at all. The 24 hours wasn't a deadline for the Zagarans, it was preparation time for the most coordinated hostage rescue operation the galaxy had ever witnessed. The aftermath was, to put it mildly, revolutionary, Graktol continued, his scaled fingers manipulating the holographic controls to show news reports from across the galaxy. Within 6 hours, the entire Zagaran collective had been dismantled. Their hidden bases located, their supply chains severed, their financial networks frozen. The display showed various alien news anchors, their expressions ranging from shock to disbelief as they reported on the events. The galactic community was stunned. Not by the violence there had been remarkably little, but by the sheer efficiency, the precision, the completeness of it. Species that had suffered Zagaran extortion for centuries watched in astonishment as humans accomplished in less than a day what combined galactic efforts had failed to do for generations. Graktol's tertiary eyelid flickered rapidly, a sign of remembered excitement. But the true masterstroke came next. Rather than simply announcing their victory, the humans released what they called an evidence package to the Galactic Council. Comprehensive documentation of every Zagaran operation for the past 70 years. Financial records, victim statements, accomplice networks, hidden assets, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. A three-dimensional display of interconnected data points expanded across the hologram, showing thousands of linked crimes. This wasn't just about rescuing their people. The humans had turned the entire operation into a galactic judicial case. They didn't want revenge, they wanted justice. And they brought receipts, as the human saying goes. Graktol barked a short laugh that startled several cadets. The most telling result. In the 52 years since this incident, not a single human vessel or settlement has been targeted for ransom. Not one. The lesson was written in neon across the galaxy. Humans don't pay ransoms. They pay visits. The display shifted to show Admiral Blackwood at a Galactic Council hearing, standing calmly at a podium. When questioned about the seemingly disproportionate response, Admiral Blackwood explained something that fundamentally changed our understanding of human psychology. She said their approach wasn't new, it was ancient. Humans had spent centuries on their home world dealing with those who used innocent lives as bargaining chips. They had learned, through painful trial and error, that paying ransoms only finances more kidnappings. Graktol's voice took on a note of grudging respect. She explained that humans had tried negotiating with terrorists throughout their history. But they had tried paying ransoms. They had tried ignoring the problem. They had tried everything and found only one approach that worked consistently, making the cost of taking hostages so catastrophically high that no rational being would consider it worthwhile. The display showed the remaining Zagaran forces scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy, their once powerful collective reduced to isolated bands of refugees. That day established what we now know as the human deterrence doctrine. They will extend every diplomatic courtesy, every chance for peaceful resolution exactly once. After that, Graktol made a sweeping gesture with his hand, mimicking something being wiped away. The humans have a phrase for it: trust. But verify. They will trust you enough to give you a chance to do the right thing. But they will verify your actions with preparations for the worst possible outcome. And they will execute those preparations with a precision that borders on the terrifying. Graktol's breathing slits flared with what the more perceptive cadets recognized as admiration. The Zagaran Collective, a criminal enterprise that had terrorized the galaxy for generations, became extinct as a political entity in less time than it takes to complete the average diplomatic lunch. That, my eager students, is why we now have an entire course dedicated to human negotiation tactics. Graktol straightened his diplomatic sash and looked out at the silent lecture hall. The cadets sat transfixed, many forgetting to take notes as they absorbed the implications of the story. And so we return to the present, he said, his voice gentler now, to this classroom, where you are learning the subtle art of interspecies diplomacy. The holographic display behind him shifted to show the emblem of the human diplomatic corps, a stylized olive branch intertwined with an outstretched hand. The most crucial principle you must understand when dealing with humans is this: honest negotiation always works. Always. Humans are remarkably flexible partners when approached with transparency and good faith. Grak-Toll's claw tapped against the podium for emphasis. The corollary, however, is equally important. Coercion fails catastrophically. There is no middle ground with humans when it comes to extortion, threats, or hostage-taking. The response is binary and absolute.